কতজন হলো অ্যাটেন্ডেন্স দেখো তো একটু প্লিজ।
স্যার আপনি ছাড়া 71 জন।
71 জন হয়ে গেছে না? ওকে, তো আমরা বলি
জি স্যার।
So let us start. You're already 74. কারা দেখি ভিজিবল আছো? অনেক ছবি সবার। Okay. স্লাইড কি দেখা যাচ্ছে?
জি স্যার।
Okay. Good. So let us start discussing today human impacts on the environment very quickly. This part is basically to give you ideas, particularly on how the human beings, have been impacting on different components of the environment. I have already discussed the different components of the environment, terrestrial environment, and how they're interlinked. I said if any sort of change, taking place in any of one of the components might change or bring changes into another, components. Then development, right? Development and degradation, right? We say there's a close relationship between development and degradation, which means environmental degradation, right? Even if you do any sort of development with good intention, right? I said it brings no, benefits to the environment, right? Development is basically defined any process towards modernization, right? It can also be measured in terms of economic growth. Any sort of process. Development is basically a process that is intended to improve the standard of living, okay, economic well-being of the people. Development, for example of development, infrastructure, industries, buildings, roads, embankment, right? Even development of other services, goods, even values, right? So development can be, in different forms. But particularly if you talk about physical development, infrastructural development, that you see in the capital city, in urban areas, right? These are all, examples of development. So development, why should we do development, right? It's a continuous process. You have to remember, continuous process, right? It's continuous process. Now, why? Because from the beginning of the civilization, human beings, have been, inventing, innovating, right? Exploring, discovering many things that is unveiled, unknown, unexplored. It is basically the intention of the human beings. Now you can consider any sort of products, any sort of, as I said, perhaps I gave example of the development of railway trains, right? In terms of efficiency, is being enhanced, is being developed. Okay. All right, but it's a continuous process. You cannot stop it. You cannot get it back. You cannot, let's say, take your lifestyle back to let's say 200, 300 years, 100 years that we had at the time. We cannot really do that. We have to proceed. Right? Once you have got the taste of development, modernization. One second. Thank you. ঢাকা দিয়ে দেন একটু। টাকা তো সব না, মনে করেন যে টাকা তো অনেক ইনকাম। টাকা দেখা গেছে যে একদম মনে করেন ফুটপাতে ব্যবসা করে অনেক টাকার মাল। Sorry. So let us define again development. So development, is a continuous process. We have to, carry out development activities continuously to, let's say, continuously improve the standard of living and lifestyles. But the problem is, if you do development, it suddenly brings problems, damages to the environment. That's a problem. Okay, and then let us try to relate how development leads to environmental degradation, right? Okay, environmental degradation, if you define it, normally I ask in the Viva board, right? And those of you who study environmental management should have this concept. When any of the components of the ecosystem, wetland, forest, land, etc., leads to such a situation due to natural disturbances or anthropogenic activity. But you assume normally environmental components get degraded due to human activities, human disturbances. The part of the ecosystem cannot get back to its original state. This situation leads to degradation. Let me give you an example. For example, if there is a river, right, close to your home, close to your place, right, population grew in number and they continuously exploit natural resources, particularly fish, right? If it is over-exploited, it leads to, sometimes the situation happens that there will be no fish, right, in the river or in the pond. Why? Because of over-exploitation. You have to give time to the ecosystem for its regeneration. We call regeneration, right? If you don't give it time, right, for regeneration, because every ecosystem has certain carrying capacity. We call carrying capacity. I hope you will, note down all these concepts that I'm talking about. Carrying capacity. It's kind of elasticity. And those of you who have studied physics, elasticity, threshold, right? Otherwise, it will lose or exceed its capacity. So you have to exploit resources within the capacity of the resource systems. Otherwise, the situation leads to degradation. For example, in our country, we see our land is overexploited. Our land is not naturally getting fertility back. Rather, we give input, external input, right, to make it again fertile or suitable for agriculture. So river overexploitation and any other aquatic ecosystems, if you continuously exploit resources without considering its capacity, its carrying capacity, it will lead to degradation, right? It is to some extent damage to local or global ecosystem degradation or the biosphere as a whole, and particularly due to human interventions, human activities. It occurs when human resources, plants, habitats are consumed faster, right? Then nature can replenish them. For example, we depend on these resources, fisheries, plants, right, etc. But we have to give time to nature, so that it can be naturally, naturally regenerated, replenished. Replenish means compensate. It's getting its natural state back. Right, so there is a close relationship between environmental degradation. And to some extent, you can also remember this terminology, this definition by UNISDR. UNISDR means United Nations International Strategy for Disaster Reduction. So this institution was created in 2000, but it was renamed later as UNDRR, United Nations Disaster Risk Reduction. Okay, United Nations Disaster Risk Reduction, but initially it was United Nations International Strategy for Disaster Reduction. So it defines the reduction of the ecosystem to provide social economic services. Now, for example, the Buriyanga River currently cannot provide any social economic benefits because it is degraded, it is overexploited, and particularly due to human interventions, human activities. Okay, so development is a process again. Urbanization is another example of development, right? If we have urbanization level increasing, for example, that means more and more people are living in the urban areas. Okay, this is an example of indication of development. Okay, for example, in Bangladesh at the moment, around 35% people live in the urban area. But we expect to have this percentage around 50% by 2050. More than 50, no, around 50 or more than 50%. That means gradually people will be living in the urban areas due to development process, and we will consider it development. Okay, so urbanization refers to the process in which an increasing proportion of an entire population lives in cities and the suburbs of cities. Urban population growth, migration, expansion of area, and important urbanization. There's a close relationship between environment, development, and degradation. Environment, development, and degradation. So environment is there, physical. Development means you convert it into urban areas, built up areas. That means you need to construct buildings, infrastructures, right? So you have to transform. It's called transformation of rural land use into built up areas. That is, important process of urbanization. Okay, transformation, conversion of rural land use into built up. Okay, so industrialization, urbanization, and all through all these activities, right? Particularly manipulation and horn component, manipulation, transformation of land. Right? We call transformation. Industrialization again, transformation of lands for production, waste disposal, emission of greenhouse gas, etc. Right? So development means if it is urbanization, if it is industrialization, but it leads to environmental problems. Right? Very simple. Okay, now let me give you some ideas on how population growth is taking place on Earth. You see, it's very interesting. To see in 1650, how many years it is? 350 years. Now, 350 years back, total global population was around 545 million, 55 crores. Just think about it. North America was only 10 lakhs, Asia and 33 crores. Let's take a look to these statistics of population. The first census in 1655 by the Canadian colonies of France, Sweden 1750. When they started actually the census some 350 years back. Okay, and then if you take a look, more statistical population growth, 1650, total population of the earth. 1950, that is 300 years later, it rose to 2,500, 250 crores, right? You understand what I mean? 1916, 10 years, you see, 1650, then 1950, 300 years. Okay, around 200 crores added. In 10 years, 1950 and 60, another 50 crores added. And then again 50 crores in 9 years, 10 years. And for the first time on Earth, in 2013, the Earth experienced 7 billion plus population. And at the moment, it's 2021, 8 billion plus, right? 8 billion plus population. And top 10 populous countries on Earth, you see China, India. China is at the moment is 165 crores. Now the statistics is a little bit earlier. Old statistics. We have to update it. India is already 135 crores. Just think about it. Bangladesh also there. See, We are very proud of it, right? How many population we have. You can keep your country in the top 10 position. Okay, now take a look at population growth again. Few millions, 10,000 years before present. 50 million years before present. Only 5,000 years ago, before present, for example. 0 AD, 300 million. And 1 billion in 1802. That means 200 years back, 220 years back, the population for the first time became 1 billion, 100 crores. And then 200 crores, 185 years later. Another 1 billion added in 34 years. Another billion, you just think about it. How faster 1 billion population, was being added to the total. In 13 years, 12 years, just imagine. That means the rapid population growth. The growth of population currently, the globally, just imagine how faster it is. 9 billion in 2050, 9 billion is projected. Right? There is also some projection. If we take a look to this graph, the population can be double the present population. Red color shows. At the end of the century, total population can be 14,000 million, means 14 billions. 1400 crore, 1400 koti hote pare. Just imagine. Okay, at the moment, if it is 8 billions, I mean, we've got a lot of problems, on Earth. I talked about ecological footprint, exceeding the biocapacity, exceeding the capacity of the biosphere, particularly human demand over natural resources. But what happens in 8 years from now, when the population becomes double? Just imagine. And keeping in mind that the population distribution will continue to be uneven. Now, for example, in the Asian and African countries, the population growth will be tremendous, rather than the Europe and the United States and Australia and other parts. Okay, now let us start talking about the human impacts on environment, what it did actually over the periods, starting from 8,000 years before the birth of Jesus Christ. I mean, 10,000 years ago. Okay, 10,000 years ago. We call the Holocene period. This 10,000 years ago, Holocene started, and even the warming period started. We call warming. Okay, Holocene. You see, at the time, the human settlement and farming began. That was basically a revolution, first revolution. The settlement, agricultural revolution started, farming. And see, since then, landscape and environment have not been the same. Nature loves diversity. Farming relies on selected crops. So the moment human beings, could manage to, collect or domesticate, right, the agricultural crops, right, for their, food, for example. Okay, and they started relying on the farming. Crops, selected crops. But nature loves diversity. But in the beginning, human beings are all nomads, right? They are not really settled. The moment people were settled, they used to depend on particular crops. That means your diversity is gone. So with the progress of time and with the increasing population, innovation in agriculture, industry interfered with nature and environment. Okay, so that's the beginning. When you settled your lifestyle, you started relying on the selected crops. Agriculture started. Now, for example, at the moment in the world, most of the lands are modified. We are doing agriculture, right? So agriculture means, as I said, relying only on or farming only on several crops. There are still biodiversity, but what happens in Bangladesh even 50 years back? You cannot imagine the diversity that we had 50 years back. Enormous. Our indigenous species, both flora and fauna, and even diversity in agricultural fields, farming crops. There's really diversity, but later gradually to fulfill or to meet the demands of human beings, particularly the specialization, monocropping started. Monocropping, specialized rice, for example. You understand what I mean? And we had in the 50 years back, for example, in Bangladesh, we had enormous wild relatives. We call wild relatives. That was not really farm practiced. I mean, they cultivated, but there are, I mean, those are the wild relatives. They simply, I mean, grew in nature. Okay, but if you have diversity, you will have certainly diversity of living organisms, right? Living organisms, and it is always beneficial, for environment. You need to preserve diversity, maintain diversity. Okay, so that is basically the beginning of the enhanced degradation by human activity. And then life expectancy throughout the world also enhanced, in Stone Age. Just think about it, 200 years back, before Second World War, and now, 60 years, average. But in Bangladesh, you just think about it, it's more than 70, 75, 73. You are, around, let's say, less than 25. I know what happened, in Bangladesh some 40 years back, right when I was a kid. In the rural areas, people, I mean, with an age of 40 years, simply grew old, and even they used to die before 50 due to malnutrition, due to scarcity of food and all. Okay, so human development progress have been possible with the manipulation and destruction of natural environment, natural landscape. Human development, so-called development in the urban areas, that development that we experience, enjoy, currently. It has been possible with the manipulation and destruction of natural environment. We have lost our rivers, we have lost our natural forests, for example, in Bangladesh, right? I still remember, you talk to your parents, the state of the rivers that we had 50 years back, right? We had abundant, enormous, extensive rivers, extensive fisheries in this country, extensive forest resources. Okay, all scientific and technological development are geared towards increased food production, right? All technology, scientific innovations are all made for increased food production, that we have to this way, that way, increase, enhance food production. Why? To support, to meet the increasing demand of the enormous population. Example, wonderful example is Bangladesh, India and China. Better healthcare, increase industrial production, increase consumer goods production, increase energy production, increase transportation. So therefore, the rapid population growth, demand for everything grew rapidly, and which in turn contributed to destruction of the environment. I hope you get the point. Now let us look at a short list of human impacts, particularly impacts started through deforestation. Deforestation. World has lost 80% of its forest cover to deforestation. 80%. There is no primary forest on Earth. Okay, so grassland and wetland destruction, grassland and wetland. These are converted to farmlands, urban and industrial areas. For example, in Dhaka, more than 70% buildings are constructed on wetlands, right? And these wetlands used to play a very important role in maintaining, for example, microclimate, fisheries, even I mean, they used to retain water, huh? Used to contribute to flood protection, even groundwater. Yeah? Just think about it. Are they necessary? Can you go back to nature? Agriculture is another big sector, right? In which we human beings have, you know, made revolution. Okay, to feed the growing population, agricultural practices have extended to forests, cutting down trees, for example, not only in Bangladesh, Amazon, you know about it. There's a politics of destroying Amazon forest, expanding Brazil's agriculture. And they have got huge demand of agricultural products around the world. Grasslands, wetlands, marginal quality soils, and climatically marginal lands. So you see, due to agriculture, because we need agriculture, we need to carry out agriculture. Bangladesh entirely depend on agricultural activities, right? Even during Corona period, you see, I mean, what our government actually did, right? Help the farmers so that they can harvest their, crops timely. Otherwise, the country will tremendously suffer. Agriculture again, input. What are the inputs for this innovate? Increased production in agriculture, irrigation. You need irrigation to get water. Surface water is already gone. There is no surface water left due to increasing demand over water for irrigation. Fertilizers, right? Fertilizers, input, external input, herbicide, pesticides, energy. We have been using. What are the results? Environmental degradation, soil erosion, soil salinization, soil fertility loss, air and water pollution. Okay. Other uses of forest, other than conversion to farmlands, forest, for example, globally, the demand over forest has increased manifold due to lumber, timber, furniture, paper product, railway sleepers. Right? You need forest resources, cutting down trees, and you have to supply all these materials. What are the results? Environmental degradation, soil erosion, increased flooding, soil loss reduction, carbon dioxide sink. The question to the world community, whether all these are necessary, can you go back to nature? Freshwater availability, only fraction of a percent of all water, freshwater, right? So groundwater, for example, then surface water, water uses, irrigation, 70% is being used, freshwater. Industrial uses, freshwater, 35%. Domestic, 5%. Okay, use of chemicals for multitudes purposes. For example, fertilizer, herbicide, pesticide, medicines, many other chemicals. What are the results? Air pollution, water pollution, groundwater depletion, toxic wastes and all, right? So due to increased, uses of all these chemicals, right, for our, increased food production, agriculture, we are using all these chemicals, right, resulting, severe environmental pollution. Oceans, even oceans, we have contaminated the oceans. Over exploitation of oceans is happening. Just think about it. Ocean is said to be the, in the past it was assumed that the ocean offers unlimited resources, but even oceanic resources are becoming scarce. We surplus to learn. Oceanic is scarce. Oceanic resources, right? Due to, the technological development. People know the demand of particular resources, oceanic resources, crabs, shrimp, or let's say whales, sharks, and they are overexploited. They're exploited. People know where their habitats, right? So people can easily now catch, harvest all these resources because they are of high demand in the market. Ocean resources. Ocean resources, one is through through overexploitation. Another way of degradation of the ocean resources is contamination, right? Through discarding the disposals, wastes. For example, nuclear wastes in the past are all dumped into the oceans, and even we have got some studies in the Bay of Bengal, right? Acidification is happening due to contamination from municipal wastes, from shipbreaking yards. So this way, that way, the entire art world is contaminating the oceans. I remember, I used to travel over all the oceans. I remember, the Atlantic, Pacific. I've seen all the oceans. And from the plane, when you have experience, you can see there is no space in ocean where there is no ship. That means, millions of ships are running, and they are contaminating continuously. Sometimes they sink, discard, the contaminated fuels, for example, making noise, making huge disturbance to the aquatic animals, oceanic animals, for example, leading to all environmental degradation there. I hope you assume it. Even controlling stream flow, river. There is no river, big rivers on earth, not uncontrolled. All the rivers are disturbed, controlled, right? Or, for example, for flood control, hydropower generation. Now, when you construct big, large hydro projects, the river is simply dead. There are many examples. For example, the barrage, the Farakka barrage, for example, over the Ganges, right? Or irrigation purpose or navigation in Kolkata port, if perhaps you know about it, and what happens in downstream in Bangladesh due to all these barrages, Tista, Farakka. There are many large hydro projects as well for electricity generation, right? We call Three Gorges Dam in China. And there are many examples, even in Bangladesh, where the river Karnafuli, 230 megawatt of electricity, the capacity, but you have destroyed, damaged this river. Okay, so now large number of dams in the world, 40,000. Dams means the purpose is to generate electricity. 137 of them generate hydropower. Number of dams in the USA, 79,000. Just imagine, it's such a big country requiring huge power. Three Gorges Dam, I have already mentioned in China. It's world's largest hydroelectric project, generating 18,000 megawatt, even more than the total electricity produced in Bangladesh from a single hydro project. Just imagine, it's Yangtze, river Yangtze. I have not seen the Three Gorges Dam, but I've seen the Yangtze river, Yangtze in China. But there are many other environmental problems happening there due to the construction of these dams, social and environmental, problems, particularly river, erosion, landslide, even vulnerability or proneness to earthquake, all happening there. Okay, irrigation canals. There are many other countries having irrigation canals, including China, India, Vietnam, Pakistan, Egypt. The impacts are soil salinization, waterlogging, water loss due to evaporation, etc. The question is, can we return the rivers to their natural flow? Because most of the rivers in the world are disturbed. The natural flow is disturbed, it's controlled. Sometimes damaging, killing all the rivers, natural processes. The question is whether is it at all possible for us to give all the life back. Okay, I hope you got my point. Then the water pollution, again, is tremendous in the world due to agriculture practices, right? We use herbicide, pesticide, and all chemicals simply are washed into the river. Okay, there are many statistics here. I'm not getting into that. For example, River Ganges is one of the most polluted rivers in the world, the holiest river for Hindu communities, or one of the most polluted. Why? Because cremated bodies dumped into this cremated bodies, because for Hindu communities, it's a sacred river, it's a holy river. So after the, dead body is burned, the ashes are dumped, right? Even pujas, they are also dumped, for example. This way, there in the upstream, the Ganges is already dead. Agricultural pollution is severe, fertilizers, herbicides, pesticides, trash, etc. You see the river, the state of river Ganges, the pollution, contamination you see, and the photograph at the bottom, you see Chitaram River in the nation, one of the other polluted rivers. Huanghe River, China, Marilao River, Philippines. And there is a interesting story of the river Cuyahoga. It's called Catching Fire. You have to remember this term, Catching Fire. Story of the Cleveland. What happened in 1960s is the river was covered with a thick layer of oily debris. As a result, one day the river caught fire. River caught fire, you see, just imagine. And there was a saying, if you fall into the river, Cuyahoga River, you won't drown, you will decompose. I hope you got the point. নদীতে কেউ যদি পড়ে যাও, কেউ ডুববা না, ডুবে যাবা না, কিন্তু তুমি ডিকম্পোজড হয়ে যাবে, এত কন্টামিনেশন, এত ব্যাকটেরিয়াল, ভাইরাল, microorganisms are there. Just imagine, বুড়িগঙ্গাতে একদিন হয়তো it will get also catch fire, right? Because of thick layer of oily debris. But if you see the rivers of the United States, it's completely restored. Apparently, it assumes you can drink water from the river. And the state of river water quality is excellent at the moment in the United States. Right? But you see what happened in the 1960s. Catching fire. Right? Catching fire. 29th, 2nd of 1969. June 22, 1969, the Cuyahoga River caught fire. You have to remember, it is all mentioned in different environmental management book. It is an interesting story in the history of environmental degradation on Earth. Urbanization is another one. I was talking about it because urbanization means, conversion, transformation of rural land, deforestation. Due to deforestation, deforestation is required to convert it into urban built-up areas. 1800, 2% people used to live in the urban area. 50, 30% average, 30, 60%, 13. And there is a statistic you see. In China, a city of the size of Philadelphia is being built every month in China. That means how faster urbanization is taking place in China. You'll be surprised. So this is China. If you go there, you will understand. You see the state of different cities in the past and present. Seoul and 60, present Seoul. See, 90% of urban growth in the next 25 years will occur in less developed and developing countries, particularly Africa and Asia. Most of these will be in already overcrowded cities, even Dhaka, even Mumbai, Buenos Aires, Rio de Janeiro, Mexico, Bangkok, Cairo. They are already overcrowded. I have been to Cairo, I have been to Manila, I have been to Bangkok, Kolkata. So I experienced, from particularly Manila cities, Manila, highly overcrowded and traffic conditions severe there. Anyway, so surface transformation, I already mentioned surface transformation due to urbanization, traffic congestion, big cities, urban heat island effect, air pollution, waste production. The way more and more people are living in the urban areas, more and more wastes will be generated. Okay? Sewage failure in many cities. In Bangladesh, very good example. slums in large and mid-sized cities in developing countries. Slums in Dhaka, 30 and 1/3 slum dwellers. Just imagine. 1/3 of 180 million people. Just imagine how many people live in the slums. What are they doing and what sort of living condition is existing there. Right? In terms of waste management, what is happening in Dhaka? 5,000-6,000 tons wastes are generated every day. And simply maximum 30% is well managed, but the remaining of the 50% is dumped elsewhere. Metropolitan Mumbai, urban population in the past, the slum population 60%. Sao Paulo, 55% slum people. Kenya, 50%. Slums in Dhaka, you see, we know. We don't need to explain it. Okay, so let me stop. I have got some other slides to talk, in the next class, and then we'll switch to the next topic. We don't have time. I have another class at 11:30. So get prepared for a roll call. Roll. Anvir Ahmed?
Yes, sir.
Asfatara Jolly.
Present, sir.
Raina Khan.
Yes, sir.
Moshumi Akhtar.
Present, sir.
Mahapara Hassan.
Yes, sir.
Oliur Hussain.
Yes, sir. স্যার আমি আছি
হ্যাঁ অলিওর সব দিয়ে দিচ্ছি অলিওর না ওরি আবুল হোসেন টিটু
ইয়েস স্যার স্যার আমি গত ক্লাসে ছিলাম
ঠিক আছে দিয়ে দিলাম নাজবুস সাকিব
ইয়েস স্যার
পূজা দে আনিশা খন্দকার
Yes, sir.
রুকাইয়া তন্নি
Yes, sir.
প্রেজেন্ট শরীফ
ইয়েস
রুবা তামিম সাবিনা
Present, sir.
আক্তার
Present, sir.
সুবা তারান্নুম
Present, sir.
তরিকুল ইসলাম
ইয়েস স্যার
তাসফিয়া নওশিন
Present, sir.
ফাতেমা
Yes, sir.
মনীষা বিশ্বাস very good. তানভীর মোহাম্মদ ফারহান
ইয়েস স্যার
মাহিন মেহনাজ রফিক ফরজান
Present, sir.
ওটা অন করে রাখি আমার ভিডিও কি অন দেখা যায় রফিক ফরজান আছে রফিক ফরজানা
Present, sir.
ওকে ইসরাত জাহান রিয়া
Yes, sir.
হিরক সিং
ইয়েস স্যার
নাদিয়া নওশিন
Present, sir.
আয়েশা মাহবুব
Present, sir.
হাসান
Present, sir.
আবু রাইহান
প্রেজেন্ট স্যার
হাবিবুদ্দিন আহমেদ
প্রেজেন্ট স্যার আমি গত ক্লাসে ছিলাম স্যার
হ্যাঁ দিয়েছি মারুফা খাতুন
Yes, sir.
একটু দাঁড়াও কি রে ভাই ও ইয়ে না হ্যাঁ থ্যাংক ইউ এটা শুধু ওই বললে হবে না বলো তো ইয়ে ফেলাম করে ফেলো মারুফা আছে মারুফা কথা আছে ঠিক
Yes,
আছে
sir.
আচ্ছা স্বপন কুমার আয়েশা সিদ্দিকা
Yes, sir. Present, sir.
বিবি হাজেরা ওমর হোসেন
প্রেজেন্ট স্যার
শাহিনুর রহমান
ইয়েস স্যার
রাফিয়া সুলতানা রনি হোসেন
ইয়েস স্যার
Present, sir.
জাহিদ হাসান ইয়েস স্যার স্যার জাহিদ হাসান
মিরাজুল মনিরা
Yes, sir.
ওকে দিয়েছি লতা
Yes, sir. Yes,
তামিমা
sir.
আক্তার হাবিবুর রহমান
প্রেজেন্ট স্যার।
শাহিলা
Yes,
আক্তার,
sir.
ওবায়দুল ইসলাম, খালেদ
Yes,
মাসুদ,
sir.
হালিমা
Yes,
তাসনিম,
sir.
নিউক্লিয়ার
Present,
মারমা,
sir.
ফাহাদ বিন
Yes,
ইসলাম,
sir.
তাইমা আফরোজ,
Present, sir.
উম্মে নাবিলা,
Yes, sir.
আজহারুল ইসলাম,
Yes, sir.
আহার,
Yes, sir.
ফাহাদ,
Yes, sir.
সাইফুল ইসলাম,
Yes, sir.
নুসরাত জাহান,
Yes, sir.
তানজিল আক্তার,
Yes, sir.
জসিমউদ্দিন,
Yes, sir.
মেজবানুর,
Yes, sir.
জিয়াউদ্দিন, সরি
Yes, sir.
হ্যাঁ ঠিক আছে, জাকিয়া সুলতানা, জাকিয়া সুলতানা, জান্নাতুল ফেরদৌস,
Yes, sir.
খালিদ হাসান ভুইয়া,
Yes, sir.